Hey, good morning, Grace family. So good to see you. See you in the chat. But yeah, welcome. Glad you're here. My name is Corey. I have the privilege of being the Newburgh campus pastor and helping to get to be on the online church team, helping to make this experience happen so we can still kind of have church together every weekend. I am here to host a Q&A time with our weekend experience pastor, Mike Jones. What's up? I'll let him introduce his family in a minute, but I just wanted to set the table a little bit. We're doing stuff like this to help us stay connected, engaged, and feel more in community. At the end of a service, it's kind of a unique opportunity to ask questions to the Jones crew about what it's like to be a QuaranTeam, and kind of walk out practically some of the steps that we hear Pastor Jared talk about in his sermon. Get to kind of continue that conversation right here. So if you have questions, you can drop your questions in the chat, and our team will acknowledge you at that, and they will drag them over to my screen so that I can read them and ask them. We might not get to all of them, but my challenge would be, hey, keep your questions related to the sermon, the QuaranTeam, things that we can discuss with the Jones family. And if you've got some other stuff going on, if you're struggling with your QuaranTeam or maybe some other stuff that's going on in quarantine, would you just click prayer? Would you engage in prayer? Let one of our team pray with you and talk with you about what maybe some next steps that we have for you. So I'm going to hush now so we can hear from the Jones family. Mike, you want to introduce your family to us or let them introduce each other?
How do you guys want to do that? This is Seth, Josh, and then my wife Kristen, and then Kylie on the end. Yeah.
Nice. Seth, I heard you got a mustache. Is that true?
It's in progress. It's working. Yeah. Mustache is a strong term. I don't.
All right.
A bunch of hair, perhaps.
Well, they're both single. All right. No. So I want to jump in for some serious questions first, obviously. Question from Darrell is for Seth and Josh. When are you guys going to be on Fortnite again? Just kidding. Don't answer that. No. So
that's what the response was.
No. We'll jump in with some other questions. But for those of you who don't know, the Jones family are incredibly talented. And so Mike helps us put on, he is the weekend experience pastor, right? So all the creative stuff kind of comes from Mike. And Kristen helps us, and she works in marriage mentoring, right? Kristen, that's true?
That's true.
She does a lot of coaching with us. And then all of the children in various different ways are instrumentally talented or comedically talented or video editing talented. So if you've got questions for them about what it's like to be a QuaranTeam, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat. First question we have, and I don't know who maybe should answer this, so I'll kind of leave it open for the family to decide, is what happens when you are not the one who is resentful, but the other person is resentful. So like when seems like there's and I don't have a lot of context to give you, but it seems like there's sort of an unbalance of resentment happening in the relationship. I don't know which one of you wants to take it, but there we go. First question.
Yeah, it's hard because definitely context is a big deal, but I think there's probably some cues that are happening which make you kind of aware that somebody else is resentful. So I would imagine that there's lack of communication that's happening, or there's we're kind of putting each other off or whatever it might be. So I think once you are attuned to those cues, then obviously communication is a big deal, and trying to ask questions and trying to find out, hey, have I done something that's been unloving to you, or is there something wrong? Is there something that we need to talk about? I don't know, thoughts you guys have.
I think it varies from person to person. I think that your response to each person is different because of how you or in their relationship is. It's like me and Josh deal with conflicts differently because we'll probably just be angry at each other for like 20 minutes and then walk into the room and punch him, and then we're good. And then with Kylie, I have to like give her a hug and say I'm sorry and everything. And yeah, so I think it's different with.
So this is just to be clear, this is not a Grace Community Church endorsement of punching your brother. No, that's so funny. That's how my brother and I would deal with conflict as well. It would just be more like physical. But with my sisters, it was not that way. So There's definitely a relational piece, like knowing the context of your relationship is probably really helpful. So I'm not sure where this question is coming from, if it's marriage, if it's friends, if it's roommates, depending on what the quarantine situation could be.
Yeah.
But definitely asking questions, I think, is an important one for engaging some of that resentment. Where's that coming from? Because usually it's something much deeper within that's like causing resentment to be the thing that manifests out. So thanks for that, Mike. Another question, maybe for Kristen, if you want to take this one, is what are some practical ways to grow in our emotional honesty?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. It always starts with prayer. It's always going to start with me getting honest and real with God and my relationship is with him, how I'm spending time with him. I think often when I'm not able to be emotionally honest, it's because my relationship with him is not where it should be or where I'd like it to be. I think it starts there. So emotionally honest with other people. So I'm sorry, say the question again.
Yep. So it was, what are some things we can do to get better at being emotionally honest?
Okay.
And there was actually, some practical ways to grow our emotional honesty. And then there was another question, this might help you too, from Vincent Jing. And it was about how do you strike a balance between emotional honesty and being kind. So how do you balance some of those things? So I don't know if that helps you maybe put some more context around, because I know Pastor Jared today talked about being a safe place. So I'm thinking that these questions are kind of all in connection to building safety in your quarantine.
Yeah. I think always having a good question that you can ask yourself too. And for me, one of the questions I ask myself is that love? Is it loving? And so if I can answer yes to that, like that would be this is a loving act, or this is a loving thing to say, then it's probably a safe thing to say to somebody else.
Yeah. And it can be loving even if it doesn't feel necessarily good, right? Like, is that what I'm hearing you say? Like when we say, because we say it at Grace a lot, but it even applies within the family. Like, we love you enough to tell you the truth, right? And that can be like, the truth is those pants don't look great. Or it could be like, the truth is the words that you're saying, the way that you're speaking, like that's you're disrupting the relationship. It's sometimes love, and it is a loving thing to say those kinds of things. Is that what I'm?
Absolutely. And I think also it goes back to what Seth said earlier. It depends on the relationship too. So if I have a good relationship with you, then I can pray about what is that loving thing to say and how do I say it to that person. If I don't have a good relationship with you, then maybe that's not the right time.
Yeah, no, that's great. Anybody else, Kylie or Josh, you have any thoughts on kind of like emotional honesty? What does that look like for maybe a younger adult living with parents, staying at home? How does that emotional honesty kind of go up towards your parents and out towards your siblings?
I mean, I feel like if you both like know in the relationship too that that's what you're kind of agreeing on is, hey, like that's how our relationship is. We want to be with each other. I think it makes it easier to talk to each other. Like I know that like I can talk to my mom about anything because we have that kind of relationship where we've kind of come to this point where like she can talk to me about things, but I can talk to her about things too. So you know, I can be open with somebody who's equally open with me. I think makes it easier to have that emotional vulnerability because it's not just one-sided. It's not just me coming to her being like, hey, I have these problems, and then her trying to fix them. It's kind of like a two-way partnership kind of in that. And I think that makes it helpful.
Yeah. Wow. That was really good. Could you like say, what was it? There was a line I wanted to requote, but then I saw the dog and I was like, my ADD did a thing.
Again, welcome to the quarantine.
Creating the two-way street, right? Remembering that when it comes to emotional honesty, it's like a two-way. The relationship is key, and I think that's what I'm hearing from like a theme throughout the whole Jones family is like kind of knowing where the relationship equity is at. So it's really cool. It's really important, especially as it relates to like safety in relationships, but also in your home right now. So
I'd also say too, like, and I think this was something that Jared was saying during that part of the message, and I remembered it because I think it's something that definitely hit home with me. Is that when you do have that relationship, even if it's open and you're able to talk about things, that when somebody approaches you on something in the family, that sometimes pride can get in the way, or you're kind of spaced out and you start getting attuned to, hey, quarantine, or you start getting attuned to your school or to work pressures or whatever it might be. And so you allow pride to get in there. And so when somebody does approach you on something, even if you do have that open relationship, it can sometimes be hard to hear it. And having those questions or those things, or even taking a step back and being able to say, okay, they just approached me on this. I need a second to be able to process that, or to be able to think through, did I respond well to that critique, or that somebody bringing something to me that I need to address? And that, I think that's a challenge, though. And it can happen whether you're in quarantine or not, but I think quarantine probably does heighten that.
No, I agree. I think that goodwill, like those thoughts of goodwill in your brain, like, and it's so hard, especially when you're all trapped in the house together and nobody gets it, and it's like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? And we have fear, and we have anger, we have stuff that's going inside of us as well. So I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
With all that said, if you can keep in your mind that that these people have my best interest at heart, like I believe that they care about me, and if somebody snaps at me or is unhappy with me, I can say this person loves me, and even if they're having a hard day, I'm not pointing at you, I'm sorry. If this person or is unkind to me, it's that he has my best. Like, I know he loves me. I know he cares for me. So maybe he's going through something right now, and I'm going to try to like bring that out or help him through that instead of, And you talk to different people different ways, just like you said, right? Like, with me, I'm going to like, hey, what's going on? Like, we're going to have an in-depth discussion with you. I'm going to be like, what is going on? Stop acting like that. We talk to different people, and I know I can do that to him. Like, if I baby him, he's not going to like that.
Yep. Well, and you won't get to like the root of what's happening, right? I always think about it like when someone is, explodes or says something aggressive, or there's that tension that builds. If I can get to wherever I'm at, if I can get to the place where I can see and hear those words as something deeper, then we can get to the solution, and we can coach, and we can, the relationship will grow. If I can get to that place first where I can say, all right, like it's a humility thing is really what it is. And Pastor Jared talked about it last week. It's like putting my pride down so that I can hear what's really happening in this person's life versus being offended by however they burst out.
Right.
But it's a tough thing to do, especially when you're on top of each other all the time.
All the time.
24/7.
All the time.
For the last 6 weeks. So, all right, we're going to move on to another question. This one, I'm going to read it, and I have an idea about what I think it means. But I think there's probably another question in here that I think probably a lot of people are struggling with. So I'd be interested to hear the Jones family take on it. It says, this is from Lulo. And, I think I said that right. Maybe not. Too late now. So it says, especially in this quarantine, I've been mean to my kids when they ignore me because their full attention is on their games. Is anyone else experiencing something like that? I don't know what to do. So I think probably the broader question coming out of that is, my kids are on their video games. My kids are maybe not as engaged with me as parent as I would like. So, and it has caused me to be mean. It's a theme, honestly, I've heard a lot in this quarantine. And meanness being like, frustration. At least that's how I'm hearing it, not in an abuse way. I'm hearing it in a, frustration kind of way. So I'd be interested to hear, are you guys experiencing anything like that? Not to like put all the family laundry out there, but is that something that resonates true? And how do you guys handle that? And maybe you've handled it in the past, so it's kind of helpful now, but I would love to hear some practical stuff from you guys.
Come on, boys.
Right.
Have we been mean? Tell us.
No, I would say more that I had to adjust how I acted whenever you would come downstairs asking me to help you with something when I was playing something. And especially when it's like not a game you can pause. We'll go with playing video games. It's not a game you can pause, and you're coming down asking me like how to attach a photo to this thing or something.
Yes.
And then I feel like I had responded meanly. But then last week, I feel like you came down and asked me something, and I was going to tell you to go away because I needed to finish this or something. But then instead, I just put myself on mute and I helped you out while I was playing, and it seemed to help you a lot. And then I was like, you know what, that's not that bad. So that's good.
Thank you. Well, that was great from your perspective.
Yeah,
That's good. That's kind of like taking it the reverse way.
Well,
Yeah, honestly, though, that's a helpful perspective. I would say even for parents who are struggling figuring out what's happening in their kids' brains when this is happening. Seth, that was actually really insightful. It might have been a little frustrating to hear because I'm like, oh, but I needed help with the attachment, man. Like, but no, I appreciate you sharing that. Anybody else got something that they want to add to it?
Well, right now, the thing about, at least for me and Seth, about like playing video games is that that's the only way now that we can experience any sort of like community or get a chance to be there with our friends, because we're all stuck at home right now. But so when that time that you get to spend, playing a game with your friends and it gets interrupted, it can sometimes be, a little bit frustrating. But, yeah.
No, that's actually a great point. I think sometimes it's an important, I think probably a balance. Then maybe Mike and Kristen could speak to that, like some balance in the way we engage technology and screen time and all of those things. But then there is, for anyone younger than 18 or really the next generation, there is a connectivity to technology that maybe us as parents don't have or maybe recognize. So that you bring up a great point, Josh, about like you just said, that's my community though. So it does when we're living in so much disruption, community via technology is one of the like most stable things, especially for students. So it is an important like thing to remember as you have the conversation, probably around boundaries and around respect and the way we have those conversations. So I'd imagine that's what the Jones parents would probably speak on with some authority. So I'll leave it open for you guys.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and feel free to jump in, but I feel like obviously the time during quarantine, it feels a little bit different because where we would normally have boundaries that we even talk about and we agree on. It's like, hey, this makes sense for us as a family and it makes sense for you as an individual. Hey, we want to help guide you in this, especially them being older, being young adults. And but at the same time, also understanding quarantine. So there's grace in that. And, obviously being open in communication and talking through those things. Yeah. But it's hard because you're trying to balance this paradigm that you're not used to. And even though it's been 6 weeks, it still feels a little bit strange. And so now it's like, I don't want that to be the new normal, but at the same time, you've got to try to figure out how can we work this out during this time. Right. But while we can still have mutual respect for each other, understanding that we want the best for you. We want you to be able to connect, but we also want you to be connected with us as a family too. So I think it takes time, it takes understanding. And I think probably the older they are, it's easier to be able to reason with each other than probably even with younger kids. But I still think that even for an adult, for me, like I need to have those boundaries for screen time because it starts to, everything for me is also on screen.
Yeah.
And my community is on screen too. So I totally get that and understand it. But I also need that break from it as well, to just mentally and being able to connect then with people that I'm actually in physical connection with too. And so I think that as parents, then we still need to be able to have that. It's okay to have that expectation, even if it's been adjusted, but then being able to communicate that and, hey, let's have some communication about it, but also making those boundaries clear of like, hey, I want you to have that community, but then there's also going to be a time limit where we want to be able to connect in person too.
Yeah, no, that's really healthy.
We've been parents for 24 years and we homeschooled all our kids. So I can tell you that there are ebbs and flows in life. And there are times like when we were moving where like if my children picked up a book for 2 months, I would be surprised. Like it just didn't fit where we were at that time because I'm packing. I've got little ones. You're just like, go watch a movie. It was okay. Like, and at the time I remember feeling, oh my gosh, is this okay? Like I know that feeling of like, okay to really just put them in front of the TV all day long, probably not, whatever. But that's what had to happen at that moment. And I can tell you that all these children survived. My oldest graduated from Liberty University. This one's almost graduated from Liberty University. That one is halfway through university. This one's going to graduate as a senior in just a couple weeks. So everybody lived, everybody survived. They all did really well, and they're all functioning adults. And we've had times like this, and it's going to be okay. Like, just take a breath and have grace for yourself and have grace for everybody else in the home.
Wow. You are like giving us, that's like such a good truth. And I like appreciate the permission to like have grace for yourself. I think so often it's hard, and it's even harder when you're just kind of like, when it feels like the four walls are just caving in on you and they're squishing. It's hard to then want to step back and give grace to each other and to yourself. So yes, if you have sent your kids to go watch a movie in this quarantine, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. And helping to adjust those expectations. And honestly, something that I think we talk about, it's been talked about in the Orange curriculum a lot for our Grace Kids people, is making some of those moments. Like, you're not going to be the perfect parent all the time, but you can make a moment every day, every week. Make one moment, some of those impactful, like memory making moments. Your kids aren't going to remember every second of their life. Like, if I asked your kids right now about what happened on, this day 22 years ago, nobody remembers, but there are moments, but we can remember the moments. So this is a great time to not be perfect and to really, for us as a family, it's about showing off our imperfection, our humanity in a way that leads us to healthy conversation. So I think, and obviously my kids are 4 and 2, so we're having lots of those. Just kidding. It's mostly just like screaming and shouting in my house. No, but ideally, right, the picture, but just knowing it's not going to be perfect. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. Okay. I want to ask some more question. Seems like we've got a lot of question on resentment, so we could maybe dive into some more resentment conversation if you guys are good with that. Resentment in relationship, I think, and how that plays into safety. Sherry asked, my resentment comes into play when someone hurts me and doesn't apologize or acknowledge what they have done. How can I get over that so I can forgive and move on? And then there's another question on resentment. So I'll let you answer that one about when someone doesn't acknowledge that they've hurt you. How do you move on? How do you move forward from that moment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think even Jesus approaches that too in the scriptures and talks about if you know that your brother has something against you, that you should go and talk to them. I think that the converse is true too. Like, if we know that we have something that we've been hurt, and while it's not easy, and especially if the other person isn't acknowledging it, to be able to, again, depending on your relationship of how you approach them, but being able to go to them and to say, hey, I don't know if you know this or not, that you what you really hurt me. And actually, Kristen and I think have done that many times. And Kristen has been really good about that, because I think I will oftentimes say or something or do something, and we may not even know that we've hurt somebody by our actions or by our words. But being able to approach the other person in love and to say, hey, can I just talk to you about something? You may not have even recognized this, but you did this or this happened, and it really hurt me. And being able to have that conversation, the key will be, again, how you approach them in it. And if you come at it really aggressively, that can change and alter the conversation completely. But so I think being in that, understanding your relationship with them, but being able to be truthful and honest with them and sharing your feelings, that actually leads to deeper relationship. Yeah. Especially if there's a healthy way that's concluded, or what, that you bring resolution in that. But oftentimes it's probably that the person didn't even know that's why they haven't asked for forgiveness or anything about it.
I think that you have to forgive them in your heart before you approach them, because no matter what their response is, you've already forgiven them and it doesn't matter. So that's great. And if you approach them without already having forgiven them, then it can be harder to take in what they say, and you'll just be thinking angrily maybe while you're them anyways. So.
No, that's really good. What you described, like forgiveness in your heart before you approach, like, to me strikes on all the unconditional love chords that Pastor Jared was touching on. Was, if I can come to you with my feeling and with my wound, but without expectation, and not going to you to heal, but to God for healing and to God for peace. So I think that was really wise, Seth. How old are you?
19.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, that was just really well done.
He's beyond his years. No, he's
No,
not.
well said. It was a good lesson to learn too. Anybody else got anything? We've got just 2 minutes left. Maybe some closing remarks. What's it like? How are you guys doing in quarantine?
I think the idea of also like controlling your thoughts, like again, it goes back to believing goodwill of people, and that's hard, but also just like capturing every thought and taking control of it. And we can't do that on our own. We have to have the Holy Spirit. So we have to have help to do that. It's really, really hard. So if you're depending on yourself to forgive somebody, if you're depending, because sometimes there are some really bad hurts out there. And if I'm depending on Kristen to forgive somebody, it's just flat out isn't going to happen sometimes. So, but with the Holy Spirit and with God's help, and yeah, I can do that. I can forgive people, but it's hard to do it on your own sometimes.
That's so real. That's awesome. All right. I'm getting the 1 minute warning, so I might get cut off here any moment. Thank you guys so much. Jones family, you are awesome. Thank you for spending time answering questions. Thank you, Grace family, for tuning in. We will see you back here for the 11:30 service. If you're sticking around for round 2, well, round 3, I guess at this point, I'm losing it. And yeah, if you want to get connected, join us on Facebook, in our Facebook group, Grace OC Church Online, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.